is the flavor that just says Femme Hot Girl Summer inspired by Miss Leah Chase?
Wait to welcome you to our Freedom Festival, July 8th through the 9th, through the 29th, for what I promise you is the official Hot Girl Femme Summer.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to welcome you to this beautiful event, which is our keynote at Love is a Kind of Cure. As you know, this is the July Freedom Festival. I am your host. I am the co-founder of Love is Kind of Cure, Machochodi Makene, and I'm really delighted today to be here with Marcus Samuelsson, chef, as well as pastry chef and writer Klancy Miller. Both of these humans are incredibly inspiring and beautiful and offer all of us just so much nourishment through what they do daily and what they do that's extremely exceptional, that's not so quotidian. If you don't know Chef Marcus Samuelsson, he is somebody President Obama counts as his favorite chef. When President Obama and Mrs. Obama did their very first State House, or White House rather, state dinner, they speed dialed this particular chef. So we're really excited to speak with him. And this gorgeous woman who I absolutely adore, Klancy Miller, is behind several books at this point. But the thing that really tugs at my heart completely is this magazine she's founded called For the Culture. And it's the first of its kind. Like, this has never happened before. It's a magazine that's entirely dedicated to celebrating Black and brown women chefs. So I'm so excited to have you both here. Welcome, welcome. How are you?
Wow.
Good.
Excellent. I was hoping, as a place to begin, maybe we can go all the way back and take folks to a food that for you is, or an ingredient, right, that feels like your very first food memory. Klancy, I'll start with you. And if you can give us a little bit of, like, bring us into the story, give us a smell, give us a taste. I wish I could reach in and get that taste, like, virtually, but give us what you can. Who shared that first ingredient with you?
Well, two things come to mind. I'm a sweets person. I have a sweet tooth. So my first, there are two competing memories, but my first food memories, I was born in New Haven, Connecticut. We left when I was really young, 4 years old, but that's where I learned about cannoli. So one of my first favorite foods was just like a cannoli, like the ricotta, filled with ricotta with like maybe a couple of chocolate chips. I'm guessing there's still an Italian presence in New Haven, but we had a wonderful Italian family living next to us who sometimes shared food, but there was a great bakery that had the best cannoli. And so cannoli, also Mississippi mud pie, that was a close second. That was my other favorite food.
Say a little bit more about what Mississippi mud pie is. I've never had that.
Okay, so I actually haven't had one in a while, but when I was really little, again, still in New Haven, 4 and under, my parents used to go to the Chart House restaurant, and I was always interested in dessert first. And they had Mississippi mud pie on the menu, which is kind of like, it's kind of like a chocolate cream pie a little bit, and it's got layers of like, I don't know if they are Oreo, but it's like crushed chocolate, like biscuit en français, but like cookies. You know, it's got this crunchy factor, it's got a chocolatey factor, it's got a whipped cream factor, and it's messy, and it looks, you know, the chocolate makes it look muddy, hence the, I guess, the mud pie part, but it's crunchy and creamy and chocolatey and delicious.
Yum.
And little kid Clancy loved it, and I still love it. I just haven't had one in years. I have cannoli more often than I have Mississippi mud pie, but those are my two first favorites.
I love that. I'm gonna have to try one of those, hopefully sooner than later.
They're
Marcus,
good.
how about you?
I would love, for me, I think it's my two backgrounds. You know, I would say chickpeas in Ethiopia, no matter what, who you are, what family you come from, what background, we eat something called shiro. It's a chickpea flour that you simmer. I know Clancy have had it. It's really what everyone in Ethiopia at some point of the week is eating. And for my family, is one of the things that I think about because when I was really young, me and my sister and my mother, we had tuberculosis. And my mother, I know this, that my mother walked us into the hospital in the capital. And during that walk, she took in dried food, and the chickpeas are dried, and then with a little bit of liquid you can simmer them and create shiro. And in her walk, which was over several days, I know that, you know, she had two kids with her, me and my sister, and she had shiro with her. And I think also a little bit of berbera, because that's the spice blend that we eat in Ethiopia. So I would say that, and dried injera. So those are the things for me that I would not have, we wouldn't have survived. I wouldn't have come to a Swedish hospital. I wouldn't have been adopted. So I think those, the berbere and the shiro, the chickpea flour, is something that I always think about. On my Swedish heritage, I would say just lovely memories of rolling meatballs, you know, with my grandmother. I'm the youngest. My sister's for 7 and 3 years older than me. There's not a lot of things that I could do to beat them in anything. And this is the only thing that I could do at my 6-year-old self or 7-year-old self. And part of it was probably because my teenage sister, she was like, I don't want to mess around with these meatballs. I want to eat it. That's it. But it was, you know, building confidence in something that I learned so much in my grandmother's kitchen. I think many reasons why I'm a chef today. I'm equally passionate about cooking and all the different avenues we can go into today in food has been about heritage and place and culture, so on. So yeah, so I wouldn't be here without the meatballs and the chickpeas.
Yeah. I'm so glad. Thank you both for, you know, bringing us into those early memories. Marcus, I'm so glad that you bring the story up of walking with your mom. I was so profoundly moved by your memoir and where that memoir starts. And I mean, I have chills just rethinking and hearing your voice, because I also gave myself the treat of listening to you tell the story. And one of the things that strikes me is, you know, your mother, this really powerful woman who, you're here and you love food and Beber and all this rich heritage that you're giving to us is because of her, right? And you describe in the memoir how you don't have a photograph of your mom. And when I read The Rise, and when I think quite frankly about just the history of this particular country, we're here in the United States, we're 400 years outside of the beginning of white supremacy here on these lands. And I think about the Black and brown woman who've shaped the food that we constantly consume without thinking, and without thinking of their hands making that food. I think, at least in my mind, I see a little bit of a relationship between the anonymity of these women who have shaped food and our foodways, and this beautiful story that you bring us into through your mom and her not having a photograph. And I wonder if you, in writing The Rise, if you saw a relationship there, if if that resonates with you.
I mean, in both in both The Rise and I mean in all my book work, I always had great collaborators. You know, when one of the first projects that Clancy and I worked on was The Soul of a New Cuisine. You know, so Clancy helped me, and among several people helped me put that project together. At Yes Chef, I knew my story, but I couldn't articulate it, and I had an incredible partner in it, Veronica Chambers. She's an amazing writer, like an incredible writer. And, you know, Veronica and I have been friends for a long time. So Veronica, I felt a lot of trust in sharing my story with Veronica. And then when Veronica was really, I remember the day when she walked in with this line, this is how the book should start.
Yeah.
She was very clear about how the book would start. And, you know, sometimes you need to share your story with someone else, and the other person that you trust sees it very different because you might be too close to sharing your own story. So, and even with The Rise, working with Usai, which is equally brilliant, you know, I worked on all of those books. Each book takes 4 years to make, but without these incredible collaborators, Usai, Veronica, Heidi, and Clancy, none of these projects would have been shaped the way they are. And I feel like we still articulating Black excellence when it comes to food is something that I think is one of the most important works that Clancy has in front of her, that I have in front of me, that, you know, we're all inspired by Dr. Jessica Harris and so on. So I just feel like we're in this moment where there's more channels to articulate ourselves. And so much of my work is connecting Black excellence, walking away from this anonymous labor to visible labor. You know, one of the reasons, for example, why we have an open kitchen at Red Rooster in Overtown and Red Rooster in Harlem was because I wanted our customers to see, not have a peek window into who makes the food, but a big gigantic window into who is part of making their experience. So, you know, everybody contributes to this moment of what America's food looks like, what Black food looks like, and what the intersection between Black excellence and America's food. And I think this is one of the most unique times ever because we have social media, we have these incredible platforms that we can share it, and it hasn't always been like this. It's been a long journey. So I just think it's a very special moment, and that's why you see so much great work. The work has always been there. The work has always been great, but the avenues and the opportunities for people before us wasn't the same.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because if you were raised like I was by those Black women, I'm very much aware of how much the authorship was always there, but it wasn't necessarily acknowledged, which is part of why I'm so grateful to Clancy and your work around For the Culture. You know, that is as public and as bold a celebration of our authorship as I know, right? So I'm curious for you, what's that journey for you? What was it that compelled you over all these years of all the brilliant things you could be doing, to say, you know what, I think it's time to shine some light on this and make a relationship between, or taking that anonymity away from anonymity, as Marcus is saying, and bring it into visibility?
Well, a few years ago, it may be closer to 4 or 5 years ago, I was asked by another publication to consider guest author or guest editing an all Black issue of their magazine. And I found that intriguing. And I started thinking of who I would want to be involved in it, who I would want to write about, who I would seek out as writers, and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, that project didn't go forward, but that idea was kind of implanted into me, and I kind of was thinking about it night and day and realized I have to do this. And I have to figure out a way to do it. So hence the crowdfunder to fund the first issue. And I specifically wanted to do it, not just because the idea had been presented to me, but it was intriguing to me both as a writer and a reader, because I don't feel like Black women and femmes get enough credit or kind of like room to shine in terms of mainstream publications. So as a reader, I was interested in creating a space where Black women and femmes in food and wine and hospitality could take center stage. And I was interested in what would it look like if we are the ones telling the stories, and if we are the subjects. What does that gaze look like? What does that perspective look like? What does it look like if we're the ones creating the images, telling the stories, being the subjects, creating the images? What does that look like? So in a way, it's kind of an experiment, because I didn't have the answer. I didn't know what it would look like. But I also knew I didn't want it to focus solely on people who are very well known. I wanted there to be, as well as writers, I didn't want every writer to be, incredibly seasoned and, widely published. I wanted it to create a space where people at different stages of their development as writers or cooks or sommeliers, et cetera, could have space to be celebrated and to explore our relationships with food and wine and hospitality and eating and growing food. Yeah, I don't know. Did I answer the question?
No, keep going. No, I'm not here to stop you. Keep going.
But yeah, those were all of the sparks. That's what went into it.
Yeah. Listening to you, something that really stands out, I'm South African, and for me, the very first time that I got to experience snippets of being around our own authorship are actually not in South Africa, but here in the US, because of the craziness that is apartheid South Africa and post-apartheid South Africa. And I'm curious, in this project, in For the Culture, you talk about us seeing ourselves and celebrating ourselves and what it means when it's a Black woman who's behind the camera, right? And it's a Black woman who's writing the story. What do you think that kind of self-authorship does? And how does it change or innovate or expand the conversation around food?
Well, I think hopefully, and Marcus touched on this, we're in a place of renaissance. And I actually think it could be argued that Black people throughout the diaspora are always in a place of renaissance, because we're always creating, I feel like we're always leading, we're always creating huge parts of the culture and leading and being cultural makers. But I hope, I get goosebumps, like reading through, editing the first issue, I definitely had goosebump moments of just like, wow, this is all by us, every single story. So I'm hoping that it's inspiring to people and that it kind of, you know, the saying, when you shine your light, you give someone else permission to shine their light. So
Yeah.
my hope is that it's inspiring. When I read a book like The Rise, when I read a book like High on the Hog, when I see the Netflix show High on the Hog, I see all these people carrying on a legacy, but also creating something new, you know, in all these different places. And so I just think it gives us, not that we need to ask, but it gives permission when you see so many people creating things, telling these stories, owning the stories, sharing their stories. I think it really gives you permission to hopefully do your own thing, you know, whether it's writing a story, starting a business, you know, having a pop, whatever that thing is. And we're talking within the space of food and hospitality, but I hope it gives people affirmation that you should do this. You can do this. Somebody very much like you is doing something incredible, and we don't have to wait for certain things. You don't have to wait for fame or attention, because again, one of the reasons why I wanted to do For the Culture is to shine a light on a lot of people who aren't necessarily written about a lot, but are doing incredible work.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, all the things that you're saying, and having read the first issue, I definitely feel that sense of affirmation, and I very much see the different kinds of voices in different places in their career. But I think it's also speaking to, at least for me, as an inspiration point, right? I see it in conversation with The Rise, which I'd love to dig a little bit deeper into, Marcus. For me, The Rise did all of these things that Clancy is describing, something that gives you permission to imagine yourself more boldly and more, just more. It's not just boldness, it's also a sense of, I'm so capable. I mean, one story that stands out to me is John Dabney, and, you know, this man who, Marcus, if you care to share this story, I'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah, sure.
But really, my question is, what did you learn from putting this book together that kind of surprised you?
Well, I mean, I always knew that Black people are amazing in food. I always operated with this idea. I remember once, which was a sort of like a shifting moment in my life, that was like I was very confused. And this is not that my experience was different than any other, but it's my experience, so I want to share it, right? I was in France. I was 23 years old, and I worked in a 3-star Michelin restaurant. I felt that I could achieve something. I was navigating I grew up in Sweden, so I navigated in French, working in French, in an all-white environment, things that I've been used to for a long time, but I worked at the highest level. So when chef asked me, what do you want to do? He wanted me to go with him to another place that he had in Nice. And I said, for the first time ever, I said no. The chef was like, chef, I can't. I have to go on my journey now and eventually open my restaurant. And he said, that's not possible. What do you mean? I said, I have to go on my journey. I'm going to become a chef. Even if it's not happening within years, I need to go. And he said, well, listen to me good. He said, do you know any Black chef in France that owns a restaurant like this? And I said, no. Do you know any Black chef in Europe? And I said, no. He's like, that's your answer. You have to lower your ambition. You can work in a restaurant like this, because I allow you to do that, but you can never own anyone. And I've operated that conversation, which was 25 years ago. I've operated with that for the rest of my life, right? Because in many ways it was one of the worst moments, but it's probably one of the best moments in hindsight because it gave me clarity. I need to leave the situation and I need to go and create somewhere else. And the answer for me was come to America. I would never have left Europe without that. I just needed clarity and I got that clarity. And that was the last time where I really thought about Blackness and in terms of why don't we belong. I knew, I mean, though all the sort of the hush words and all the sort of like racism, the undertones, the symbolism, all of this stuff that we all know, I just knew that from that point, this is going to be my journey. I have to work towards changing the narrative, not opening doors, but crushing doors and achieving it. And I didn't know how and when and what, but I knew I'm going to go to New York. I came to New York and it gave me clarity. And I think when you come to a city like New York and you need to enter a space and an arena, particularly as a young Black person, you need to do it with clarity. And I had that clarity. So I've operated not from kind of, sort of, I've operated with clarity when it comes to food, with a deliberation and clarity. And it was with that everything that happened in my early part of my career in New York. And it was with that clarity I wanted to open Red Rooster. Of course, there's doubt in the journey. But then I've been lucky enough to have amazing mentors like Miss Leah Chase, 95 years young. She passed away 2 years ago. But, and my neighbor, Sylvia Woods, and not just, and also been surrounded with amazing people like Klancy, like Veronica, like Eduardo Jordan, and so on, right? So when you have not just the elder community, but you have people coming up in a similar time. And the rise is an affirmation of that, right? That's why we look in the past.
Yeah.
We'll look at the elder first and we thank the people that came before us, but we're very much in the present and in the future. That's why the youngest person is 17 and the oldest person is 95. And because there needs to be a pathway, Blackness links us. It's not monolithic. We have different stories, whether you come from the Caribbean or like you and me that come from Africa, or somebody that came up through the migration journey and so on, right? So it was important to share John's story. It was important to share Donna Pierce's story, being a food writer in Chicago. It was important to talk about Tiana, in our early 20s. And it was important to share someone like Greg Godet, that is kind of mid-career and all of the above. But it was also important to share, which happens to all of us, right? When someone says, maybe a non-Black person said, I want to help out. How can I be part of this? I don't know any Black chefs or food writers in my state or in my city. So, I'm like, no, you can't. That's not a viable answer. That's why you have 200 or so chefs and food writers mentioned in the back with their Instagram handles. So no one can say that, oh, it's only New York or in Oakland or something like that. No, this movement is across the country, and there is an incredible Black food writer, recipe developer, filmmaker, chef in your community. Yeah. So for me, I don't think one story is bigger than, I don't really want to highlight one story over another story. They're all part of this incredible puzzle that makes the rise being what it was and being what it is. And I'm just, if you're a chef like me that has a platform, it's your job to gather, broadcast, and present.
Right. That's beautiful. And it very much, what you're saying about you can't say you don't know an amazing Black chef, writer, critic, etc. in this country. Listen, you can say that across the globe. And you can take that for any industry, not just food. And for me, when I look at High on the Hog, which you were just talking about a little bit earlier, I think, Clancy, you brought it up. I'm very inspired by what's happening there. I'm so thrilled by the food stories that are fresh and young and contemporary that are coming out of the continent and linking people to, hey, the past is not so past, it's alive and it's here and now. And then I think about your decision to put Dr. Jessica B. Harris on the very first cover of For the Culture. And I'm like, number one, yes, all the things. Like this moment is just all the things. But I'm curious for you, Clancy. Number one, what that means to you, what the book High on the Hog means to you, as well as, if you care to, the Netflix series, which I highly recommend people check out. But then I'm also curious, if you were in a classroom and you were using High on the Hog to tell America's story, right? Like the history of this country, what would you say?
Oh, wow. That's a lot. Well, I'll start with why I chose Dr. Jessica B. Harris. I feel like she, the statement, giving people their flowers.
Yes.
I feel like she is a person who deserves all the flowers.
Yes.
And
Yep.
I am so excited for and totally co-sign a statement that everybody should go see High on the Hog on Netflix.
Absolutely.
I'm so excited for that because it's a beautiful series that truly is birthed from her book. Like she did that scholarship for us. And I don't know if I could succinctly summarize it in a sentence or several sentences. I just think it does a brilliant job of walking us on our journey, through food. And I feel like, and the amazing thing about Dr. Harris is that's not her only book. You know what I mean? Like that's one of the reasons why I chose her, because, she's got My Soul Looks Back. She's got like 13 books, and it's there, and she's paying homage to, Brazil, to West Africa, to, she does it all. She's got books that have, kind of more of a scholarly aspect, and then, straight up cookbooks and, the memoir. She does it all. So I really feel like, first of all, she's kind of like, not a kind of like, she is a living legend for a lot of people in the food world, regardless of background, race, gender, skin. She is extremely meaningful, and her work is extremely meaningful, and she's been really prolific and inspiring. So that's why I wanted to have her on the cover and to give her flowers and to just, give her props. She deserves like so much praise and recognition. And I want people to read her work. And she's here, you know what I mean? That's the other gift. She is here.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
I feel like you have to really celebrate people while they are here, and we're all here, so, and she's, going strong and will continue to be prolific. So that's why I put her on the cover. In terms of High on the Hog, I think it's probably the most important book. And definitely, I'm going to say the first, if not one of the first, to tell our story through food, to tell that migration story, which I think is so important, and that I think is so educational and helps to really connect the dots in ways that you don't necessarily see, just like it's not something you automatically know. Some things you have to kind of be told, and which is also why I think it's beautiful that it takes on this kind of multimedia aspect, the Netflix series, so that you can actually see these places and meet
Yes.
people of different generations, you know, older and younger. And there's, I don't know, it's just, it's really powerful and
Yeah.
touching and beautiful. And yeah, to know that a Black woman kind of traced all of this and, you know, told this story is incredible.
I know. And it's also it's incredible, but I mean, it's also not surprising, right?
It's not surprising at all, but it's like doubly inspiring, you
Yes,
know?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And again, I highly recommend people watch this. Netflix is not paying us. They should definitely be sponsoring, because I can't get this, I can't get high off the hog out of my mouth. And I think it's a testament to what a beautiful job Stephen Satterfield and the rest of the team over there are doing. There's another name that came up earlier, and I know from reading a lot of your work, Marcus, that Leah Chase, I should say actually, Ms. Leah Chase was such a big deal to you personally. Of course, she was a big deal to all of us because of her role in the civil rights movement. But for me, especially in this moment, when I think about 2020, when I think about where we've been and the kind of big reckoning and rupture, if you will, that we're going through throughout the world, I think about the example of somebody like Miss Leah Chase, right? And looking forward, I'm curious, what do you see that she's left on her table for us to pick up? I know that she set a really, I mean, like talk about legendary table in terms of an inspiration and a path for us to walk. Like we can literally
Yeah.
trace her footprints back.
Well, I mean, Miss Leah is, I always say is because I still think, so Miss Leah was an amazing person, just an incredible person. And one of the, well, it wasn't the first time, but going back to Dr. Jessica Harris again, one of the moments when I knew like, oh my God, I'm so fortunate to be here was actually having lunch with Jessica Harris, Leah, and this incredible writer, Lola Eli in New Orleans. And you just, it was one of those moments where like, the more quiet you are, the better, because you're just going to pick up words. And I'm the nerd writing down notes. And it was incredible because, of course, we had amazing food, but it was also weaved in with our stories, New Orleans stories, music. And, you know, to understand Miss Leah Chase, it's really incredible, her journey. At late teens, she takes over Dookie Chase in the 40s. This is a restaurant that's still going strong 75 years later. And she broke the law every day to serve Black and white people. So she was also an activist, but she was also an advocate. When you walk into that dining room, there were Beardens on the wall, there were Jacob Lawrence on the wall, there was all of these things that kind of today that you think about as part of one movement, but she did that in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s, right? And, you know, these are times where Black women, it was very difficult to own businesses, but also being a chef was completely anonymous labor.
Yeah.
Yet she was the center of her community in so many different ways. She created jobs. People came to Dookie Chase for big occasion, but also if they wanted something fast, because Dookie Chase was two concepts in one. It was a sandwich shop on front. And I say this because when I hear all this, right, for me, so Miss Leah was really Black Lives Matters before Black Lives Matters. She was also ready to pivot which we all have to do in the restaurant industry, in all industries, right? She had a fast casual up front, sandwiches, incredible, po' boy sandwiches, and she had her fine dining establishment. All of these things really created for someone that started a business in her late teens, you know? So she's super educated in life, but she did it through learning it through the restaurant, through her work, right? At the same time, raising a family, at the same time, being an entrepreneur, and then also being a philanthropist, right? So Leah, and on top of it, she might be the only chef that has been both a Disney character and in a Beyonce movie. Just a video, just that alone.
No big deal. No big deal.
Yeah. So I can go on and on and on and on about Miss Leah, because for me, there's no other. There's definitely, it's just so many moments in my life when I had to like go to New Orleans and talk to her about Crossroads. Like I remember before opening Red Rooster, I asked her, what do you think I should do? And she's like, aim high, just do not lower the standards. We need to have high standards. It needs to be layered. I remember nothing to do with food, but MoMA came to me with something. It was actually for the Jacob Lawrence retrospect. And they wanted to talk about people. They wanted to bring people to the table in terms of Jacob Lawrence brilliance. And I said, listen, there is an incredible woman that is alive, that knew Jacob, and Leah does this presentation for part of the MoMA board on her flip cell phone in the kitchen on speakerphone, and at the same time as she's stirring the gumbo, screaming at some guy who's not doing it right. And I mean, the scene of these guys sitting in there, picking up every word about Jacob Lawrence, and Leah's just running a business. And that's just the brilliance of our culture, of our aunties, right? There's always several moving parts.
Yep.
And there's always somebody that needs to be told how to improve the situation. But at the same time, you can be in these numerous worlds, right? Which I think one of the blessings of being Black is that we can be, all of us can be in these different worlds. And I just hope every single one of us realize that we belong, that we have now opened the door and enter and claim it and run it and do it, to the highest, and cook it and tell your story.
Yeah. Oh my God.
As James Baldwin said, the crown's already been bought and paid for. All you have to do is wear it.
Yes, I love that quote. We belong.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. Because the thing is, we know that our stuff's going to be done, and then someone else going to take it, redo it, and then claim it, right? It's happened in music, it happened in food, it happens in fashion, right? So the authorship, so now we're in a moment where we can claim the authorship and we can trace it back. So, yeah.
Wow. I have so much to take in, and I'm having that moment you had with Miss Leah Chase, where you're sitting there and you're like, I just need to be really quiet and just take notes. That's me right now. Klancy, I'm curious for you, this theme of food entrepreneurship, which Miss Leah Chase is such a brilliant example of, and Marcus is helping us understand the ways in which she embodied that so fluidly, right? And so abundantly, like, I could do all of this and raise a kid and hold down the city, like no big deal. When you think about for the culture and these gorgeous women that you're profiling, and femmes, I should add, how has your consumption of food changed or expanded? I'm curious for someone like me, right, who's not in the food industry. How do I show up for those Black femmes and brown femmes who are doing such cool stuff with food and entrepreneurship and building their wealth, which I have so much respect for, what does a consumer do?
Support Black women in their businesses. That's like that's the simple statement. I want to give, just dovetailing, talking about Leah Chase, I want to thank Marcus, because thanks to Marcus, I actually got to interview Chef Leah Chase 2 times. Once about her appearance in Beyonce's video. The best, probably the best interview I will ever have.
Yes.
Like, she made me laugh so hard and told the best stories. And
Beautiful.
I love her.
Listen.
Like Marcus, I think of her in present tense,
Yes,
because she's
hard.
that kind of person. You can't think of her in past tense. But so much love for Leah Chase, like an absolutely amazing, phenomenal woman, chef, like all of the words, just phenomenal.
Yeah.
But yeah, how can you support Black women in food and hospitality? Truly, it is through supporting the products, the work, the businesses. I'm thinking specifically of resources like Pick Up the Rise, read about the people in there. On Instagram, go to For the Culture magazine. Like, go to our Instagram. We highlight a lot of Black women and femmes. Go to Radical Exchange. Ashton Berry does an amazing job of curating incredible content, but really pulling in a lot of Black and brown women, femmes, people of all genders, and just, so the resources are out there. I mean, look at A High on the Hog and follow those people. Follow Gabrielle, follow Dr. Jessica B. Harris, buy her books. Follow Angela Davis, the Kitchenista. There's so many. I think one of the easiest thing to do is to buy a book, follow on Instagram, spread the word, boost what people are doing. If Black women chefs in your area, those who have businesses, whether they're pop-ups, whether, right now we're still in a pandemic, people are really doing creative things. They're chefs selling food from their homes. They're chefs doing pop-ups. There are all kinds of things. So just a little bit of research and you can find out about these people. There's a wonderful woman who at Dillard, Zella Palmer, who turned me on to an incredible person in New Orleans by the name of Linda Green, who does the Yakameen stew. I hope
of course.
And she
amazing.
She's incredible. She makes she's an incredible example of an entrepreneur selling this incredible kind of, I want to say, indigenous to New Orleans stew. She's making it at home. She's a caterer. The pandemic's been really hard on her. So Zella Palmer was like, hey, we need to lift up these Black women entrepreneurs who are really the backbones of so many of our communities, who maybe don't have a huge following, but mean a lot for their communities and produce a lot of food. So, if you're in New Orleans, Linda, check her out. There are a lot of people, and the reason why I mentioned some of the names I mentioned is because, and I'm not just talking about For the Culture, but there are a number of people and entities who do a great job of kind of curating and lifting up Black women entrepreneurs in the hospitality space. So I think it's good to kind of seek those out so you can find people to support.
Can I just add to that also? As a consumer, as a young consumer with a following and influencing people, right? We are maybe 5 years away from, food is almost not there yet, but it's almost going to be like Spotify, like finding that artist on Spotify. It's not quite there yet, so it's a little bit more work that you have to do, right? Just not a lot, because just Clancy just gave you a whole slew of incredible people, right? But it's more like vintage shopping, right? Where you actually have to do the work, but you find the piece and it's very rewarding. Or
Yes.
like, you know, maybe finding that bakery that just does that one special thing. So we are there right now. But I also think that that's exciting. That's what's exciting about it, right? So it's actually this push and pull where we need you, we need the consumer, we need the foodie, we need the food interested person to just do a little bit more work. But once you enter that space, it's incredible. It's not good, it's hella delicious right there. And it's also part of you traveling, right? Because now when you go to New Orleans will never be the same because you now have these stops, right? And when you go to Tulsa, will Tulsa ever be the same for us, right? We're now going to think about it with the 100th anniversary, but we're also going to think about it. What would have been as a food city? What if Tulsa would have been the food capital in the world today, right? So it's all of these things that, yes, our life are so easy. Everything is sort of entering our phones, but to find really delicious Black food, it's a little bit extra, tiny little extra step you have to do. But once you do it, it is like finding that club that it might not be on Main Street, but just be a little bit off. But once you open that door up, you're going to realize it's a club where everyone dancing to your tune and you're meeting like-minded people and you don't want to leave.
It's popping.
That's how delicious that is. So just do a little bit more work and you're there.
Yeah. I mean, like that club is pretty much popping. Okay.
It is.
I want to be in that club all day, and
Yes.
I want to recognize something that is kind of on the cusp of getting to that club. Like Klancy has just said, we are still in pandemic, and one of the things that has just moved me so extraordinarily is the work that you've done at Red Rooster around making sure our community is whole throughout the pandemic. I don't have anything to say about that except just like the huge fucking most sincere thank you. Like, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
It's
I mean, we have a team that once we got over the shock, we really needed. It was probably also the healing process for myself. Very early on, a dear friend of mine, Floyd Cardos, passed in COVID, and actually today, on this moment, we actually dropped the podcast about his life. And it was a shock to all of us in the industry. But again, going back to clarity, it meant like, okay, what can you do about it? And to partner with Jose Andres and to partner with my team at Red Rooster, the cooks, the servers that said, I'm in. At that point, masks weren't even available, but we got masks from World Central Kitchen, gloves, all of that stuff. And the lines that changed our lives, right? The lines, you know, as chefs, you just want customers and regulars. And we got regulars from day one, and they told us their stories. And you know, I'm still processing this whole thing, but it's definitely another chapter of Red Rooster that out of all the things, I was in the middle of planning our 10 years anniversary and I just stopped. We might celebrate the 10 years, year 12 or something like that. It doesn't matter, but it changed my life in a completely different trajectory. And there's so many people that we have to thank for that. And anyway, thank you so much for having me on this platform. I really appreciate it. And thanks for all the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you so much. But just one last note, because it wouldn't be right to not follow up on this question. Clancy, you're talking about Miss Leah Chase and Beyonce. We're about to enter this hot femme girl summer. I need notes. Like, I need to know all of the things. I need an ingredients list. Like, what is the flavor that just says Femme Hot Girl Summer inspired by Miss Leah Chase? That's where we're going to end.
Oh gosh, that's pressure. Marcus, feel free to weigh in. Oh gosh, I don't know what Leah Chase liked to drink, because honestly, as hot as it's been in New York City, I'm thinking liquids, frankly. I'm thinking cocktails. I'm thinking cocktails will be a theme of Hot Girl Summer.
It better be.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
As Clancy's thinking, I'm going to buy Clancy some time, and then you can say, yes.
Thanks, Marcus.
One thing, when President Obama goes to have dinner at Duke Chase, so as you enter the restaurant, there's this picture where Leah holds him in a headlock. And she serves him the gumbo, and he, without thinking about it, just puts hot sauce in her gumbo, and she finds out, who puts hot sauce in my gumbo? You gotta taste my gumbo. And then, like, well, Mr. President, I'm like, it doesn't matter. She runs out and tells him, do not put hot sauce in my gumbo. You gotta taste it. So that's just something.
That's like, don't do that with Hot Girl Summer. Don't
Yes, do not put the hot sauce in the gumbo. And that image says everything that you need to know about our aunties and the power and the love.
Yeah.
Everything for me. So Clancy, that bought you enough time.
Okay, I'm gonna go with shrimp po' boys.
Yes.
I feel like that's like a really summer, first of all, delicious any season, but a summer friendly, like you're kind of on the run because you're in demand because it's summer and things are opening up. But you want something spicy and delicious. And yeah, I'm gonna go with a shrimp po' boy.
I love that. I love it. I love it. And there's plenty of delicious drinks to go along in The Rise, which you should definitely pick up, in Clancy's beautiful book, Solo Cooking, Cooking Solo,
Cooking Solo.
Cooking Solo, yes.
I have a copy of that too. And I can't thank you both enough. This has been such a rich, extraordinary, expansive conversation. I'm so inspired by your work. And I can't wait to just keep eating my way through your work too. So thank you both. And good night, everybody who's signed on for Love is a Kind of Cure.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks you. Good to see
me.
you, Clancy.
Good seeing you, Marcus. Thank you for having us.